Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review. Jens Lekman, I Know What Love Isn't. Hey, it's pretty avant-garde. This is the third full-length album from this dude. I believe it is the first LP in 5 years from the Swedish singer-songwriter. And it's the follow-up to the reasonably celebrated Night Falls Over kortedala. A pretty elaborate and eccentric Baroque pop LP loaded with colorful instrumentation and sounds. And lovely songs. I'm talking horn and string flourishes, harp, piano, glockenspiel, as well as some synths and electronics and dance beats on this thing as well. It's an album that's really kind of all over the place, but Jens, with his very love-struck personality, he's just kind of strong enough to pull it all together and just make it feel, for the most part, cohesive. Plus, the LP was a very important part of his artistic evolution because his debut album was just soaked in this painfully obvious magnetic fields influence, which was cool, but he really kind of came into his own on this LP. And on this latest album, there's still no question that Jens is still doing his own thing. And I feel like on I Know What Love Isn't, he definitely meets expectations, but kind of manages to do it with less than his previous album. Less material, less eccentricity, less color, instrumentation. Stuff like piano and strings and background vocals are still on this album, but for the most part, these songs really do kind of stick to those singer-songwriter roots of bass, drums, guitar, and vocals. And if I do have an issue with the instrumentation or the production overall on this album, it's that the sounds, just the playing, it can be a little too kind of PG sometimes, if you know what I'm saying. Like, it's a little toned down, and yet it also has this extremely happy, cheery feel to it. Like, I could totally hear the soundtracking me prancing gleefully down Sesame Street or something like that. The instrumentation gets especially weird on the track She Just Don't Want to Be With You Anymore, where, man, this is just like some Celine Dion My Heart Will Go On pan flute type shh. At times, I do kind of wish the melodies and the tempo of these tracks matched up a little bit logically with the heartbreak and the emotional confusion that Jens is going through on the stories with a lot of these tracks. But still, for the most part, what you're going to hear on this album is going to induce some very good mood vibes, even if they are kind of a bit cloying at times. Is it too late to mention that sometimes the melodies, the chord progressions, the arrangements are a little too tried and true to be feeling all that fresh or amazing? The real meat on this album comes from Jens himself, his songwriting, his singing, his lyrics, just his personality and how he consistently stays on the topics of love and heartbreak. Still, he brings the kind of charisma and poetic genius and hilarious musings and unique perspectives that kind of make listening to stuff like this worth it all over again. And that's apparent right from the first track, where Jens sings, "Erica, America, I wish I'd never met you. Like I wish I'd never tasted wine or tasted it from lips that weren't mine. Now every drop tastes more bitter all the time." And right after that particular lyrical moment in the song, this schmaltzy saxophone comes swaggering in. Despite the fact that there is a lot of heartbreak and just relationship issues on this album, Jens does have an incredible amount of swagger, which is why I definitely do not hesitate in recommending this album to anybody who liked that Destroyer LP that dropped last year, even though this album is much less drenched in 80s chic. The next track on here has a funny anecdote in it about a friend's love interest kind of saying that, man, I wish there was a pamphlet saying, "So you think you're in love with Jennifer?" And the track kind of goes on to compare being in a relationship to being owned by somebody and preferring being free. And Jens eventually kind of takes more comfort in sleeping on his own arm to the point where he loses feeling and it feels like someone else's arm. Even though this album does feel incredibly sappy sometimes, there's a strong anti-sap sentiment in some of the lyrics, like when he invites this girl out to go see a band and she says, "No, I hate bands, I hate shows. They're just filled with guys who are desperately spooning their girlfriends as if when they let them go they just float away." There's a lot of humor in this guy's tales, and he tells many of them very nonchalantly, just kind of throwing around the word shh. Some stories that Jens works into his tracks are more impressive than others, like the song "The World Moves On." It's the longest song on the LP and kind of details in the verses all these little moments of heartbreak and how you never quite get over that, but you just kind of work out ways to handle it gracefully. Another track on here that makes an interesting statement: "The end of the world is bigger than love." Kind of a weird angle for an album with so many love-obsessed songs, but it's a point that Jens still makes. But there are points in the track where I kind of feel like lyrically he digresses a little bit, and that kind of happens in a lot of spots on this album, kind of being entertained by his own ability to throw in some non sequitur while still delivering a relatively smooth ride. The last track on the LP I love and has a strong theme though. It's a track about being close with someone and that person eventually being gone, but just the memory of them. Everything reminds you of that person or remembers that person, from the chords on your guitar to the hairs on your body. Overall, I thought this was a really good LP. If you're in the market for a singer-songwriter who has a lot of charm, a lot of wit, and some sweet melodies as well, this is definitely worth checking out. I'm kind of feeling a decent to strong 7 on this album. What did you think of it if you've given it a listen? Did you love it? Hate it? Why? And what should I review next? Remember, the good comment, the great rate, but only the strong subscribe. Anthony Fantano, Mr. Lekman, forever.